Hello, everyone. I'm Jean-Claude Beyond Mystic, and welcome to this evening's deep woo-woo episode of the Wacky Woo. With me, of course, is the one and only, the legend, Penny Kelly. You can find her at pennykelly.com, and you can also support her here on her Patreon at Penny Kelly. Penny, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I hope you are too, and I hope everybody else out there is I don't know, feeling some kind of like excitement for the future. Maybe I hope so. Yeah.
Excitement for the future, yes. And if you guys have noticed, the subtitle to my episode tonight is Resistance is Futile. And quite a few people said, Hey, GC, that sounds very negative. Well, let me explain to you why perhaps it's actually a very positive statement. Where I was going with that is that all things come to an end, right? All good things come to an end. We've heard this saying many times in many different literatures, whether it's Greek or Latin, but it basically involves change. We live in continuous change. And I think now we're coming at a point where there's so much change happening at the same time that we are, in some cases, resisting that rate of change and not embracing the new or not participating in creating the new, but rather by the fear of this rate of change, holding on to the past and the past structures that created the common shared reality we currently find ourselves in. And in that case, yeah, resistance is futile because it is very much fleeting away. And there's not much we could do about that part. But there's so much more we could do if we understand how our reality actually works, if we have a better understanding of consciousness. And I thought, oh, let's have Penny Kelly on the show tonight and discuss this. I've been tackling with some of these things here for the last couple of weeks, but really it started a couple of months ago, and I'll explain to that why in a little bit. And I want to remind you guys that Penny did offer a really, really amazing keynote speech at the conference in Ottawa, the Beyond Mystic conference, and it was exactly on that consciousness. And as I'm recalling now some of the themes from that presentation, that keynote presentation, and some of the things I've been listening to in the last 2 or 3 weeks, some older interviews with Terence McKenna, I'm starting to be compelled, be forced to reevaluate my understanding of reality, my understanding of consciousness, and not to the extent of necessarily wanting to game it or to better position myself or even to maybe escape the mundane reality that is flowing through our airwaves every day, but more as a matter of, I don't know, trying to transcend and maybe see a little bit ahead of the birth tunnel that we find ourselves in right now and find a way to have this conversation with the audience members, find a way for the audience members to look at this in a different way, also to maybe get a sense of calm in that process. And right now, what I see, Penny, in the last, I'd say in earnest, maybe 2 months, I've seen an erratic up leveling of stress in the comments in during the live shows, after the shows. And of course, you and I can understand why. We're just being bombarded with all this, gaslighting, the shit, the crazy stuff that's happening at the same time. And I'm like, well, how do we transcend that? How do we not get stuck in that? There's a lot of value in decoding that world and understanding why and perhaps who the people are and why they do the things that they do. That's still valid. But it very much comes to the individual. And tonight is a quest to understand our individuality inside that consciousness. That's where I want to go. So, Betty,
Very good.
I'm going to talk about a couple of different concepts here. I have a couple of videos, guys, that I'm going to share with you in the live links. Also, if you want to go watch those as reference material for tonight's episode, it's going to be more of a, I guess, a deep talk, and we're going to ask some tough questions. But we're also going to be challenging you to perhaps revisit the things that you think you know or that you might not know already, in the hopes that we can maybe push this conversation forward for the sake of humanity's highest good and for the sake of our evolution. That's really where all of this is going. And I think that's why I'm being compelled at that level, not just individually, but as a person who has a platform to reach other people here to have this conversation. And I thought, okay, Penny, you and I need to talk tonight. So I reached out to you last week. Let's do a show on consciousness
Right.
and where all of this goes. So as I'm framing that from my perspective of where I would like the conversation here to go tonight, What would you like to bring to the table as a snapshot here of some maybe key elements that you think are critical for us to explore this evening in the context of that conversation and said objective? Penny.
Okay, so one of the things that we had a brief exchange about, and that I listened to you and and Janine trying to sort through. I don't get to listen to very much, but I did listen to that, and it was, what about the individual? Where does the individual fit in that whole common shared reality, or uncommon unshared reality, as the case might be? And I think it's important for people to understand that you really cannot lose your individuality, and you can't not contribute what your consciousness is expressing through your words, through your attitude, through your behavior, through your whole emotional aura around you. You can't stop that unless you take some sort of chip to control it. And that's why the people that want to be in power, the powers that want to be, that's why they keep pushing this chip thing, because they know that you can't shut off somebody's individuality, because it is the nature of consciousness to create, and it can't help but do that. And it's going to create based on whatever the perception of the individual is. And if they can tweak that, if they can shape that, if they can drive that or direct that, that's a step in the direction they want to go. But that cannot be counted on. And so there has to be some sort of intervention. If you fall for that, there goes your individuality. So,
You bring up a good point there too, and I think we shouldn't glare over it too quickly here, because if we are on the same page to understand that humanity at the individual levels are all the same in the sense that we are co-creators, and that
yes,
there's a higher force by mechanisms, by rituals, by technology, are using humanity as a collective creational force for their objective, then what you're saying now is that that chip technology could be that latest innovation to keep that control going, and perhaps go even further by eliminating the individuality. And again, this is the reference to the show tonight. Resistance is futile is the Borg saying in Star Trek, right? They're
right.
going to take your individually and add it to their own collective. And that,
Right.
yes, absolutely, resistance is not futile. We have to fight that all the way. And it's in the sense of this chip technology, I'm totally with you on that. Okay, so that's a first good stepping point. What else would you add tonight that you think is important for this conversation, Penny?
I think it's really important for people to understand that they don't have consciousness, that they are consciousness. I think people hear that, but it's embedded within you. And consciousness can be shaped, it can be directed. It does have a response to everything that happens. And let me give an example. So when we're born as an infant, if nothing happens to bring all of the human systems online into a high state of function in that first 72 hours, you have to do that using massage. It's the same principle as when you watch a mother cow licking her calf from head to toe. When a calf doesn't get that, their digestive system never works right. Their elimination system never works right. They are likely to have scours. They often have all kinds of emotional, cows have emotion. They don't get along with the herd, etc. And so that same thing is supposed to happen with the human. And when you get that first 72 hours of full body massage again and again, using that creamy white stuff that we're all born with, that's supposed to be our early massage oil. And when that massage doesn't happen, we end up taking months before we're able to make eye contact, and months before, sometimes years before we walk. All kinds of concepts we are very slow to take on those concepts. And when you get that massage, typically you're able to sit up, hold your head up, make full eye contact, smile within the first 72 to, I'm going to say, 5 or 6 days of life. And most babies, you're still trying to hold their head up for them so it doesn't, wobble
Right.
all over.
Right.
When they're weeks old, and children who get that full body massage, their entire nervous system is online. They are intuitive. They become highly psychic. They are walking usually before 6 months, running at 6 months, and they are very sophisticated in their understanding of the world. By the time they're 4, they're a full contributor to the family effort, the family dynamics. So we have some things that we could change to improve our understanding of ourselves. And when we don't get that, and then, some people don't have a very good family life. In fact, a lot of people have to overcome some pretty rough early years. And then you go to school and it gets worse, more difficult, more challenging for so many. Then what happens is you end up with arrested development. And later somebody comes along and says, oh, it's about love. And you're like, what? It just doesn't sink in. And when you can't feel it, and a lot of people can't feel. They won't allow themselves to feel, or they have a very narrow range of feeling. Why can't they feel? Because half of their central nervous system is not online. It isn't working very well. And so we have to understand how we could get ourselves off to a good start. I've been saying to people, go get a series of 6 massages. That will, if you get a good massage therapist, that's going to bring a huge part of your consciousness online in a way that's very intuitive and that you never expected. So that's one thing we could do. And then from there, it's a matter of letting go, not of everything, but letting go of the idea, or let me say it this way, letting go of the meaning you assigned to those ugly things that happened when you were young, and then getting the gift out of that. What did that force you to understand? What did that force you to do? If your mother wasn't there to love you and snuggle you and laugh and smile at you, what's the lesson? The lesson is you have to mother yourself. And we don't take the gift. We never get the gift. Instead, we end up wallowing in this resentment. I can't because my mother wasn't there. Like, that's called the children of the rock. They end up with the rock inside them very early, but it becomes a millstone instead of this rock that stabilizes their entire consciousness.
And to add insult to injury, or injury to insult in this case for young boys when they are born, not only are they not getting the massage, they get sent to another room where their penis is chopped off and they say, welcome to Earth.
I know. I have watched that live and was appalled. Absolutely appalled. That poor little thing was screaming. The whole body was like, throat just stiff as a board in total protest. And they're just cutting away like that kid can't feel anything. I'm like, oh my God.
Right.
That's
a whole other episode. We're gonna have to come back.
Right.
Oh my God. When we do the What is Sex series on the Academy, we'll get into that. But tonight let's concentrate again here on consciousness. I've been watching this 3-hour interview. It's called The Evolutionary Mind with Terence McKenna and Rupert Sheldrake and another individual. And they're discussing the inevitability of where we are going as a race and how complexity is growing at an exponential rate, and that it's completely transforming our reality, and that the powers that be currently see that happening. They're afraid of losing that control that they have, and that really the efforts and energy they put into the system is only to not have the system break under watch. Basically, that's what they're after, and that
Right.
he's describing this as uh, corruption at the highest level, or the lack of intellectually and well, yeah, of intellect at that particular level. And he's saying
Right.
that that corruption is basically placed us in a collision course here with the end of time, and that in a way we're not prepared for that end of time. We're not understanding that we are currently perhaps in the birthing throes of this new common
Yeah.
shared reality, and that we don't even for uh, for
I
most
know.
of us don't even know that it's coming, right? So let alone try
Right.
to prepare for it, to transform for it, to brace for
Yeah.
it, to hopefully hit the ground running on the other side. We're not even having those conversations yet, again,
Yeah.
because the powers that be are just trying to clamp that down, and remove the
I know.
not just the individual from the equation, but more importantly, remove the uh, the experience of the individual, to where no longer does personal experience make up your reality. It is
That's right.
more important to listen to the propaganda of the state to understand your reality, at least in their worldview. So we're struggling right now with all of these um, collision courses that are coming together. And I thought, man, if we can have a
Yeah.
aha moment for reality, and I think we're coming close to it now, to where we understand that we are in fact creating this reality, that we are in fact going through or getting close to this end of time as we know it, and that we are birthing a new version of ourselves here, regardless of what the powers that be are trying to do. It would make this transition, I dare I say, smoother or less difficult. I mean, it is a
Yeah.
birthing canal, and it's not easy, and we still don't see on the other side of it. But again, as
Mhm.
most humans, we don't even understand that we are in that birthing canal. Rather, when we look at the dystopian view that has been hoisted upon us for perhaps the last 4 decades or so in movies in Hollywood, we see the end of the world as a very negative thing, to where it's the Mad Max scenario. And in my view, it couldn't be further than reality. We are just That's what they would want, because the cabal would be on top of it if that scenario happens, and that's why they're trying
Yeah.
to engineer it through this mass programming, and using us to create that common shared reality. But I don't think it's working. I don't think it's going to work, and that's where I want to have maybe that first question with you. If we can understand that as humans and start having that conversation, what do you think is the first key to stepping out of that um, collective, common, shared reality that is being generated uh, uh, by the system, versus what we want to generate moving forward? You just mentioned that for most humans, we're all conscious. We don't understand that we are consciousness. And you're saying that we came here without that first massage or those first techniques here to really embody that consciousness earlier. What can we do to first mitigate that and up the levels, so to speak, or level the playing field for humanity? What would be the first, I don't know, 2 or 3 steps
Oh,
here moving forward, Penny?
I think it's different for everybody, but in general, certainly massage is one of those steps that is incredibly powerful. And so that's one. Changing your diet is another one. I cannot emphasize, I mean, even if you're perfectly healthy and you are exercising daily and you're meditating, etc., and you change your diet, it changes your consciousness.
Mhm.
And when you allow that change, like let me just say that I forget what year it was. Gosh, it's been such a long time. I decided I was going to fast for 40 days, and I wasn't going to completely do a water fast. I got a little tiny bowl. It was, I don't know, maybe that big around and maybe that high. And I was going to have um, like herbal tea for breakfast. And I can't remember, I'd have to go back and look at my notes, but very tiny amounts of food. And I was going to do that for 40 days. and just see what happened. And by the time I got halfway through, I had stepped into this kind of consciousness that was absolutely astounding. It was my very first entry into what I'm going to call all-knowing, all-powerful consciousness, in which I was turning into light. I could see through everything physical, everything. I knew everything. I didn't need to sleep hardly at all anymore. I think I was sleeping 2 hours a night. I was mostly silent, because partly I started because I wanted to conserve energy. But that simple change, and I didn't even make it through the 40 days. I quit at 38 days because I had lost too much weight. And I was afraid at that point that I was just going to disappear into light completely. But the kind of consciousness that, the kind of consciousnesses, stages, types of consciousness that are available to us, that's one way to change your consciousness and begin to understand what the natural human, without all of the inputs that we take in. The food is a major thing. Conversation is another. Movies are another. Music is another. The relationships that we maintain are another. All of those things are input that are huge, I'll say disruptors, not always bad, but they change the consciousness of the individual, and they're pulling your attention in every direction. So change of food, that is a huge change right there. If you do some sort of, I'm going to say, exercise that stresses you to the point that you don't think you can hang on anymore, like if you're running. I was running through the streets of Detroit. This was years ago. And I got further from home than I thought I should have. And it's night, and I'm running, and all of a sudden I realized I need to run home, and I was so tired. And so you run past when you think you can keep running. And part of my running past, or keeping on going, was because I was in a pretty rough section of town, and I didn't want anything bad to happen to me. And there came a point where all of a sudden I was out of the body watching myself run. And so those kinds of things change your perception of what's possible. When you have to perform and there's no way around it, and you feel that it's more dangerous for you to stop and stroll than it is to keep running, what happened was that I felt like I was flying. And I made it home safe and sound. But after that, I began to run specifically to try to get that high again. And so exercise that takes you beyond your limit, that's very, very powerful. Meditation. Lots of people start with meditation. There's two kinds. There's active meditation and there's passive. Passive is when you just watch your breath and you try to move eventually into samadhi, in which you're pure awareness. You're just pure awareness. But active, most people have to go through even years of active meditation because they're sitting there, trying to be silent inside, and they have this thought. Sometimes that thought is something that needs to be dealt with. And so you can try on, well, what if I do this? Okay, well, what if I do that? And you try on these different potential things that you could do or say to address that issue. And one of those lights up, and you feel that all the way through you. And that's what you should do. And you get a magical outcome, one that you would never have, you might not have even thought of, you might never have had the guts to try something like that.
Right.
And so that's passive meditation. It resolves issues, and it shows you that consciousness will communicate with you as to what's your best path. And then, of course, there's always guided meditation, guided imagery work, very, very powerful. Um,
So, embodiment, reactivating the nervous system. That's where you started with the massage,
yeah,
food, exercise, and
yeah.
meditation. I'd like to add to that the conversation about psychedelics as
Oh, yeah.
a venue, an avenue, a mechanism by which to also
Yeah.
perhaps enter deeper states of awareness
Oh,
of said consciousness, right? So let
right.
me see if we can bring this up for the audience members. So in this
Okay.
3-hour video, The Evolutionary Mind, the trialogue 1, 2, and 3 with Terence McKenna, Ralph Abraham, and Rupert Sheldrake,
Oh,
there's many things discussed in this video. It's a 3-hour video, but one of them is as they're trying to understand the evolution of the mind of the human, what happened and where in that evolution. And they're talking about basically 100,000 year period to where humans achieved this size of skull. But for a long time in that 100,000 years, nothing really new changed from the previous iterations of Homo sapiens going backwards. But at 50,000 years, suddenly there was big, massive changes, whether language came up, strategic thinking, the hunting, all that suggesting that something had happened. So it wasn't necessarily the skull size, but it was perhaps integration of information, complexity moving forward through the herd, or perhaps a connection through hyperspace by the ingestion of some of these mushrooms. So they are discussing that here as one of those possibilities. Now, that is a big topic in and of itself. I'm going to try to tackle at least part of that next week, guys. If you want to share in that conversation, please join us with
yeah.
Jay Widener. This is going to be next Sunday night at 8 o'clock Eastern. And the subtitle for that one is a Psychonaut's Journey. And we're going to be discussing that in a little bit more detail. But for tonight's episode, Penny, you just mentioned some of the key things here to maybe accelerate this evolution for humans and how they can get leveled up in this playing field. I just want to go back to the robes, the men in the little brown robes, and what they told you about consciousness, what humans would be facing in this particular era right now. Some of it made it through your book, some you took out of the book, and what you perhaps were trained for even before this incarnation for this time now.
Yeah.
So I want you to go there a little bit, and I'll give you the microphone for a little bit to maybe share that and set the stage for why this time is very critical. We understand Terence McKenna's view of the reality and the bottleneck that we're in now in the birthing canal. But what did you in your training learn before incarnation? And what were the little men in the brown robes trying to communicate to you so that you would share to humanity about this current time right now, Penny?
Wow. Where would I begin? Okay, so before I came here, some things that I thought were universal were telepathy, the ability to heal, the ability to see the future or the past, the ability to communicate in such a way that whole groups would get on board and take on a project. That was all natural. Okay, and there's probably a few other things, but those things were the big. There was a lot of training that I went through before I came here, and a lot of it was preparing to lose those abilities, the insight, the psychic ability, no telepathy. It's like, oh my God, everything has to be said. I mean, one word at a time. Oh my God, that'll take forever.
It seems very laborious. Yes.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And when you have people who are, which is normal, people have their own interpretation of certain words. You could use a trigger word. We had, first of all, in the training before I came here, there were a whole series of past, what we would call today past life experiences that I was inserted into in order to have a life, in order to understand what not to do once the actual mission started. And so I had some wonderful, absolutely wonderful experiences, but I had a few that were critical. And, one of them I didn't get, and they made me repeat almost a very similar thing. I was a writer in Austria, and I was viciously writing about the king and the powers that be, et cetera, et cetera. And, and I got dumped out. The people that I was renting from said, we don't want to be associated with you. You're going to get us in trouble. And there I was, because of what I was saying, with no place to live, no money, nowhere to go, and I didn't have any family. And so, and the other one, I was so very similar, also in Austria, a lot of experiences in Austria. It was a rich place for a lot of dysfunction. And that was something that, where I was also a writer, and I was bitter, incredibly bitter, and I died of tuberculosis. And so there were other things where, where I was with a group of cowboys. We were renegades. I got shot right through the walls of a shack. And the lesson there was, don't expect flimsy physical structures to protect you. And then there was the whole experience in Polynesia, very, very intense experience there, where I was, I loved being 6'2" or 3 feet tall, and probably close to 200 pounds, but part of the royal family. And some white men came. They totally destroyed, they brought disease, and they brought all kinds of rules and guns and things that we did not have. Not necessarily guns, but cannon. And we were under house arrest, and I wanted to fight. And my father said, no, we're not going to fight. We're going to watch and learn. And so I watched our entire civilization, our culture be destroyed, and people dying left and right from measles. And that was very hard. And when Kay Ilani started coming to me in 1982, I think it was 81 or 82, stayed with me for 10 years. She said, come back here and learn, come back here and learn, come back here and look again, another experience. And what I got out of that was, oh, this is what it's like to watch your country fall apart. This is the kind of strength you need to have.
So you had that, if we were to thread all of these experiences of these past life experiences, you felt it on the individual level and then on that collective level as well, the falling apart. So that was part of that training to understand here the pitfalls and to see that coming for this particular time. Okay, wow. I don't think you've ever said that to me in such an eloquent, thank you. I really appreciate that. Now, if you want to add to that, please go ahead. But also now tie in what the little men in robes wanted you to communicate about consciousness, about this particular time we find ourselves in here now too. So let's continue on that track.
Okay, so when the robes came in, long story short, they said, look, you're here on a mission. We just want you to renew your commitment. And I did not want to commit to anything. And they said very specifically, and this is so hard for me to say even today, we want you will, toward the end of your life, step into the Christ mind, and you will spend your life teaching about the mind and consciousness, because it will help people to make it through this time and to understand how to use their consciousness. And I didn't want anything to do with Christ consciousness. I was like, they hung that guy, or they put him on a cross, or, I don't want any part of that. And they're like, look, it'll just all happen naturally. The other members of the team will find you. You will all work together beautifully, smoothly. Just let it happen. And finally, I said, after I tried to bow out a couple of years later, okay, I'll do what I can do. I'll just do what I can. Mm-hmm. And to my great surprise, I've been able to go a lot further than I thought I would. And I really am now appreciating how many people, through one channel or one person or one teacher or one podcast or another, they're starting to get that this whole thing is about consciousness, and that what we've got is not what we want, and that we want to create something better. And the questions are starting to come up. How do we do this? And I love that.
And you found your
Yeah,
team. So not only have you gone further than you thought you were going to go, but you did in fact find that team. And last year
right.
also, when you departed shortly here from the operation table, you also had a little bit
Yeah,
more insights on that on board craft. We don't need
right.
to get into that tonight here too, but just to bring that into perspective to where you're at now. Now, in that same video with Terrence McKenna, they're talking about at that time, this was recorded in 1998, and they were looking
Mm,
at two big dates ahead of them that were spelling perhaps major catalysts or major changes. And they were speculating if those two main events had something to do with this end of time, the advent of AI, and the transformation of the evolutionary mind. The one of them was the Y2K bug, which in a way turned out to be, in a sense, a nothing burger. But again, there's a mitigated conversation about that, and we can have it on another show. But Terrence was also at that time pointing to 2012 in the Mayan
right.
calendar as being a reset, a reboot type of cyclical clock that had been generated a long, long time ago and cataloged seemingly from astronomers that had more insights about our universe than perhaps we even had in 1998, which was fascinating. Now, when we look at 2012, when we look at the last 20 years, I would argue that these gentlemen were right. In the last 20 years, we've seen now enough to come to the conclusion that we are already past the Rubicon. And if you want to call
Yes.
9/11 past the Rubicon and COVID now past the Rubicon, we are definitely on our way to something new, whether that's our money systems, our religious system, our geopolitical systems. Everything is in upheaval currently. And so my question to you, if he was postulating that 2012 we would have had an indication of it, we've had, like I said, 9/11 and now COVID. Do you see the major transformation or that aha moment or that culminoric effect moment to where aha, now we can actually put that line in the sand and come together as humans to say, okay, we're in a different place right now. Nothing that worked before or nothing that we understood before even equates now in this new common shared reality, like that sharp line, whether that's conversations with the men in robes or your own intuition, your training on this mission before you got here. How far are
Yeah.
we, do you think, to that line? Is it a movable line? Where are we on that transition, Penny?
Okay. So the Mayan clock calendar came to an end in 2012, but the new calendar started. That really marks the end of a particular age of the sun and starts a new age of the sun, but we haven't had the new sun yet. And I don't know that we want that, because that's the whole, what people sometimes refer to as the solar sneeze, the solar shock, the
Mhm.
micronova, et cetera, et cetera. And we have, if you're watching all the science, we're right on track. So that's really what that clock was about. And it was a warning that said, okay, you have to begin preparing for a different kind of life, even though it's not, you don't get to that new life until you get through this geological shift that happens. So
And
the whole,
may I ask before you go too far, how does
yeah.
that tie in also to the red and blue Cacinas and that upheavaling of these two planetary bodies coming into our orbit, changing again, having all of these Earth changes? Are we past that? Have we seen that already? Or is that still around the corner? Or is that perhaps for a different epoch? And in these cycles of times that we are currently finding ourselves in, have we jumped frog that over? Or where are we on that stance, Penny?
I don't know. I
Okay.
don't know enough about the red and blue Kachina stories. I know that they're out there. That whole thing, I mean, there've been lots of claims. Oh, there it is. Oh, there it is. And
Right.
just last week, I saw a lady somewhere, I think out west, and taken a video of this moon in the sky or the sun in the sky, and the sun was going down, way, way south or way off to the left of where she was actually saying, what the heck is that? And I thought, oh, wow, okay, what is that? We don't know. And of course, that kind of thing it had a heyday around 2012, but then a lot of it stopped.
Right.
So I don't know, but
That's what I meant about the leapfrog. For some reason, it could be leapfrog by the level of our awareness of consciousness. It
yeah,
could be leapfrog by the system itself having a fail-safe mechanism at some point in this evolutionary process, similar to perhaps that message that was just decoded from the Voyager probe that was analyzed by the NASA computer last October. There seems to be these layers of maybe checks and balances into the system that might change some of those recurring loops to some extent. And we have, I'm assuming, a huge part in that also, whether we realize it or not. Penny.
right. There is some talk that that reality, that the reality we all think is only one. It really isn't. We are very multidimensional, and so at the lowest level of consciousness, the story is that sun is going to blow that world away almost. Next level up, it'll be bad, but not that bad. Next level up, it'll be bad, but not as bad as the first two. And after you get up to, I think, the fourth or fifth layer, which I have thought, is that dimension? Are they talking about dimensions? We would just need to move into 4D consciousness. There's disruption. Generally, most people survive, and the excitement is, wow, all the crap is gone. We get to build a new world. So it's kind of a rough way to, like drinking from a fire hose kind of thing.
Right.
But one of the things that the robe said was, it's going to become very important for you to live a little closer to the land. If you want to survive, you will need to reconnect with Mother Nature. That doesn't mean going back to Little House on the Prairie, which I think I was just talking about with Shala. It means that we have to have one foot in the world of tech and enjoy what that tech brings us, but manage that. And the other foot is taking responsibility for ourselves and our lives and our consciousness. And so that, the process of moving up to a higher level of consciousness just means that you can get to a place where you are, you don't let go of everything below, but now you expand up into that realm, and sometimes you can withdraw to that and just watch. And when you're in that realm, at that level of consciousness, you can, if you're conscious enough and you're bold enough, you can impact some of the things that are happening. Like make the weather do certain things, not make it, but ask it. And because the world is naturally cooperative, not competitive, then it'll listen. It'll honor the request. And so we're moving, and I've been teaching, a lot of people are trying to teach, your whole team is trying to bring people to a different experience in which they use that consciousness that they are. So
you raise a really good point there about the universe being a cooperative, because I remember this National Geographic episode, I think it was in the 80s, where they had invited this shaman who purportedly could make it rain, and they were going to bring all this technology to track the weather and put diodes on his head and his heart everywhere to see what he was doing when he was doing his rain dance and all that. and the meteorologist was there. They were all set up in the desert here, and the shaman was starting to do his thing, and the meteorologist was like, nothing's gonna happen. There's not a cloud for 50 kilometers like on our machinery. Anyway, so
Uh-oh.
the medicine man does his thing, and lo and behold, it starts to rain. And they're all flabbergasted, and they're just like, well, this is impossible. The data didn't support that. What the hell happened? And he said, well, what did you ask? What did you do? So I didn't ask anything. I was in the gratitude of for the water I had already received. And I imagined so much gratitude for this water and this immense feeling of water coming down that my feet and my toes were in the mud in
Yep.
this desert, and universe just kind of coalesced like, oh shit, that guy's in water, we have to give him the water. So that's
Yeah.
that
Right.
rule of assumption that Cliff High was talking about in his video, or what some people call the laws of manifestation for this
Right.
common shared reality. That brings me to the next point here. I think this conversation also is what's prompting me to look at this in a different way and to try to understand where the Beyond Mystic community has a role to play here, not just in understanding these deeper concepts, but perhaps bringing them to the next level, not just for themselves, but for humanity as a whole here, as again, we're going through this birth canal, right?
Right.
And so, could I maybe ask you your version of this common shared reality
Really?
of
Sure.
how some powers that be are using technology, ceremony, wizardry, all of these things to get a group of humanity to manifest the reality that they want, that further exacerbate the system of
Right.
control that we have now, and how some humans, whether innately doing so, or whether they're training to do so, but they're starting to understand now that they can, like if you listen to the Joe Dispenzas of the world and all that, they can
Yeah.
slice a piece of that event stream in front of them and attract that slice of reality into their vicinity, right? In that manifestation process. How do we, and I want to be careful here because there's a layer of being responsible with this information as well, right? Some
Yeah.
humans, we'll get into the same debate as to why free energy has not been dispersed yet. We often hear by the controllers that, oh, humanity would just blow up the planet if we did, right? In some cases, this information could be treated that way, and I'm trying to find a way that we can have this conversation in a responsible manner. And I've been beating myself up for the last couple of weeks here, trying to tackle
Okay.
that. And I think if I were to try to explain it, it might be a little bit too convoluted. So I'm hoping that you can help steer me and steer the conversation here with the audience members on what that means really on an individual level, what it means on the collective level to create this common shared reality, and how the understanding of that, the knowledge of that, and the exercising of those abilities can truly transform this bottleneck and this birthing process that
Yes.
we're in right now. Let's start there, Penny.
Okay, so if you imagine that you live in this giant ocean, it's and the best way to visualize it is to go outside and look at the sky on a clear night. You know, you can see forever. There's a million stars. That is really the basic ocean called the void. Of course, when you're looking at the sky, it's not the void. You're looking at the sky. But the ocean of the I am, which is that amazing void that we all emerge from, that's the basic medium. And within that ocean, here and there are these three-dimensional regions, four-dimensional regions, and you're one region and I'm another 3D region, and all the people watching, they're all individual, regions within that great ocean or soup. I call it the soup. And that great ocean is aware. It doesn't think, it's aware. And it is, when you start to become a three-dimensional thing, you bring that awareness with you. That's what you want to meditate to get back to, is back to that awareness of that extraordinary ocean, because not only is it aware, it is bliss. The feeling there is only one feeling. It's a bliss that is not describable. It's beyond description. There's nothing else there. It's just this giant ocean of awareness and bliss. So you live, we each of us live within that ocean. And then, because I'm an individual and you're an individual, we have these physical bodies. That's our way of getting around. I'm skipping a few steps, but basically, you come to this place where all of a sudden you realize, I really would like this to happen, whatever it is. So my little examples, I tell people, start small, use that consciousness, because you can take that incredible awareness. And so let's say I'm aware that I'm pulling out of a parking spot. Well, first of all, I'm getting into the parking lot, and the first thing I say is, find me a spot that's, not out in the back 40. and sure enough, every time before I even get the words out, I'll see a spot right handy, close to the door. When I'm leaving, I know I'm going to have to make a left-hand turn to get into back into traffic, and there's no light, and there's 4 lanes, and it's a lot of traffic, and it's like, and so I will start with, when I get to the corner where I have to turn left, make a little space for me, please and thank you. I would really appreciate it if you would make a little space. I get to that corner and there's no traffic as far as I can see. And so I just make my turn, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If I'm going along the highway, headed toward Albuquerque or someplace, and I'm tootling along at 75 or 80 miles an hour, I have my internal radar, let me know when I should slow down because there's cops. And sure enough, I need to slow down. And then I go over the next hill and there's a cop. So, you can use consciousness for all kinds of things, including healing. I hurt my thumb real bad. I was just sharing this. I had been weeding for 2 hours every day and my thumb was sore. And then one day I got up, it was like, I could hardly move it. I just took my fingers so that they were like this, and I set them on my thumb to shoot energy through the thumb, and said, I would really appreciate it if you would straighten out or stop hurting, if you would heal. And I literally felt something shoot all the way up the arm, and the pain in the thumb disappeared. I never thought about it again. It was over. So we don't use consciousness the way that we could or should. And we're not very coordinated. Telepathy requires coordination of visual, auditory, feeling, and action all at the same time. And when I used to teach classes here at the farm, I would say, okay, practice saying something, feeling it, seeing it happen the way you want it to happen, and using the right words. And people could either see it, or they could use the words, or they would stand there and kind of stare like they're trying to get the feeling. They were uncoordinated. They couldn't coordinate all of those senses. And when you want to have a powerful impact, you have to be able to coordinate vision, hearing, words, and actions all in one direction, and see the event and feel the event and hear the event and say thank you for the event all at the same time. And so telepathy takes a little bit of work. So back to let's see, now I'm off track. Where was I going? I think the whole thing in terms of understanding what we're doing, let's say that McKenna is saying, let go of the illusion. The illusion is just that you have never been taught to use all of your stuff all at one time in a way that is powerful. That's really the illusion that has to be let go of. And once you start practicing some of those things, then it begins to come together. The little men in brown robes said that the world was going to come apart, that the U.S. would break up, and that we would have an opportunity to recreate the entire world. And I saw a number of scenarios. I wrote down the main one that I saw in the book. um, there was a lot of information about energy, about money, about children, education, trade, all sorts of things, governance, leadership. And I think the leaders of the future are really, they're teachers. They aren't bosses. And I think we're seeing, when you watch Trump and Putin, we're seeing the last of the big bosses doing their work, doing their magic. So, yeah. So, did I get anywhere near in the subject matter?
Yeah,
So,
no, you did great, and I didn't want to stop you there too. And I just want to reiterate something you just said about how you were using consciousness either to manifest your reality, the parking spot, the getting out of
yeah,
traffic,
to make it easy
he-
for
he-
yourself, to make it
healing
pleasant.
yourself. Yeah, exactly. Right. Now, you
Yeah.
said there was a lack of coordination, and I thought it was funny because it's true on the individual level, because we're not taught this practice, we don't have the coordination. But when it comes to a group manifestation by means of the cabal using us through propaganda, through the movie industry, to all of this stuff, we absolutely have a lot of coordination in creating this dystopian reality, which is their wet dream, right? And to
Oh,
some extent, yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
let me add something then. So here's this individual in this big soup. Everybody, because we are electrical creatures, we have this current moving through us, and we have this big electromagnetic field around us that affects the field. When you keep saying, let's see, I want a new car. I need a new car. I want a new car. I can't, don't tell yourself you can't afford it, but you keep on saying, I really need a new car. Thank you for helping me get a new car. You're just acting as if it's already there. And maybe you're smelling that new car smell, hearing the engine, the purr, etc. That's you impacting the soup. When you keep on putting something out there again and again, the thing that people do not understand is that no matter how small, no matter how ineffective you think you are, every thought you have, every word you speak, every action you take impacts the entire reality. And maybe it's a little impact, but by God, if you keep on putting that out there and putting that out there, it starts to shape all of the energy around you, and that begins to draw, because the rule at the higher levels is likes attract. At this level, it's opposites attract, and so it's frustrating. But at the higher
It's
levels,
fascinating.
likes attract.
It's fascinating you say that. And so let me share this video with the audience members, because people are in the chat. I was like, whoa, that's cool. Never heard that. I want to try that. So here,
Yeah.
Cliff High went into a little bit more details about the rules of assumption, or what people mostly call a manifestation. And he talked
Okay.
about these four, how would I call it, items that are necessary in this mix, in this particular practice. He talked about proximity. So if you're trying to
Cool.
manifest something, try at first, like you say, the small things. So if it's
Right.
small enough, it's closer to you in this event stream, you'll have a lot more success in approaching it to you than it's far away. If it's far away, you're going to need more time, more energy to attract it to
That's
you, right?
right.
So you start with that. The intensity was number two there. How much intense thought, feeling you're putting into this manifestation, and how long you can hold that intensity will also
Right.
affect your manifestation skill.
Yeah.
Harmony, that's very important here when
Yeah.
we're in a group. It's one thing to manifest something that is positive for you, but if that thing that is positive for you is negative for other people in that same event stream, you're kind of working against that energy. The serenity is the same part about that too, holding
Yeah.
that serenity with your thoughts and your desires. So I thought that was
Right.
interesting. If you guys want to see that, you can go check it on his Substack. He did a much better job than I just did trying
Yeah.
to explain it. But those were some of the rules here, and he does explain at the end of this video the ladder exercise, which I recommend you
Oh.
watch and you try as well. So I thought that was really, really cool. Now, Using that now, that understanding that yes, on one hand, we do have the coordination when we are being manipulated by mass programming here to create hysteria around COVID, to create the cashless
Yeah,
society, the Mad Max scenarios, all the zombie apocalypse, all these things. If we understand that that's happening, that should be proof enough for the individuals watching this show who are like, "What are these guys talking about? Is that real? Like, I can't really touch it. Does that really work like that?" I'm hoping that we've given you enough insight to say, hey, maybe there's something to it. Because if those bad guys are spending so much energy, time, and resources to shape this reality to their needs
right,
with our creational skills, then that should give you the aha moment that, hey, wait a second, fuckers. I don't want to play that game anymore. I want to create for me now, right? For my family, for my
right,
kids, and for my collective, right? For team humanity,
right,
right? So that changes everything if we can change that mindset. So I think this conversation is really interesting. Now, adding to that, so let me go to the last one. This one here, the common shared reality, it's a complexity. This one was August 16th, so yesterday. This tacks on to something else he was talking about the other day in his research, that he's of the opinion that there might be something else also pressing. We might be, and this is reflects to another video before that, which was entitled, I believe he titled it Karma Wars, that there might be other entities that are not local to this planet who are also now projecting and manipulating the event stream
true,
using humanity. He talked about the Selenites, those who live on the moon, being at least maybe some of those entities that might be involved in this karmic war with humanity. So this is where I want to go back to Men in the Brown Robes and perhaps your training before you came on this mission. Who are these other players right now and how do we deal with it? Because it's one step now to be able to have the conversation of, oh fuck, these cabal members are using our creative
right,
capabilities to manifest a reality we don't want. But
yeah,
now on top of understanding that and maybe fighting that and extricating ourselves from that control, we still have to have the conversation about, well, who the hell is manipulating us also through the moon, perhaps with
right,
even better technology, which doesn't require a chip, to go back to your earlier statement at the
right.
beginning of the show. So where were we on that front, and how do we tackle that one, Penny?
Well, I think it's important to understand that we're here to learn to create, and you're not the only one creating.
Hmm.
So you are an individual within the soup, and the more you focus and feel and act in concert with, you can't do one thing one day and then do something the exact opposite the next. You end up cutting yourself off at the knees. But all of the training that I had, was with a lot of other beings, and some of them have incarnated here, and some of them have not. And so there's people that are physical, completely physical, each one doing their thing, doing a magnificent job, I might add. And then there's others that are outside, that are still in what I would call the higher levels, and they are trying to guide and direct and like, okay, we need to compensate for that, etc. But you're not the only one creating, and you have to understand that if you get one other person or two other people, that's a huge energetic shift, and you can have quite an impact, a very, very powerful impact. And so that's really how this building that I live in, this barn, came to be. I had a group of women that we met, 12 of us, every week for weeks, like for almost a year. And we would get together. We want a healing center. It's going to look like this. It's going to have that. It's going to do such and such, and all this stuff. And I would envision this thing. We all did. We all put in our 2 cents. We'd go around the circle. Eventually, we all broke up and went our separate ways. One of them died. Somebody got transferred, et cetera, et cetera. I ended up with the building. And it is almost exactly, and it was really my husband who said when I met him, I have this vision of a building that I'd like to build. And so he built it. I helped. But I didn't ever say anything about what I had done with this group of women, and I never said anything about what the robes had said we were moving toward. And it
Yeah.
wasn't until I wrote Robes and he saw it and said, well, why didn't you tell me?
Tell me.
And I was like, because I didn't want to admit, and I didn't want to admit anything. I'm
Right.
still really, shy about a lot of that stuff. But
Right.
the training was that you have to start, you speak it, you think it, you feel it, you find one or two others that think like you, you talk with them, that grows tremendously. And when you're doing, when somebody's doing the propaganda thing, and you don't have enough of yourself, you don't have enough ego. And I know I'm flying in the face of what everybody talks about ego. You need some ego in order to not become a doormat and fall
You
for
need to
every.
trust in your personal experience. I think.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm
Yes.
totally with you. Yeah. Yeah.
And so the whole COVID thing really didn't happen for me. I would hear things here and there. I never wore the mask. I didn't, I didn't stay home.
Yep.
Of course, I don't go very many places to begin with. But the whole thing it wasn't real for me. And I would hear people talk about how terrible it was. And I would think, well, why did you fall for that?
Right.
What were you thinking? That wasn't normal. It was, and
Yeah.
so people and their fears. But when you start trying to work with your individual self, the first thing you want to move past is fear, because the fear of one's own power and what you can do and become frightens the daylights out of most people.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what we call the first enemy, is fear.
Right.
So
Yeah, you and I have talked about this, and I think in the first episode of the Intuition Fridays, or I think it was Mondays back then. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's funny you mentioned COVID. I posted this earlier today. This was the work of somebody else that just retweeted it. But how you acted during COVID is exactly who you are, right?
Yeah.
And it's also the state of your consciousness and your awareness of it, falling for things or not falling for things, or as Penny said here, not necessarily having ego, but enough intestinal fortitude to believe in yourself, to believe in your own experience, to believe in what your eyes, ears are actually telling you versus what the propaganda outside of you is trying to tell you. And I think that was a big learning curve for a lot of people. But let me just direct you quickly to that second part of my question, which was this karma wars, perhaps with other beings on other planets, and here specifically the moon and the satellites themselves. What did the robes suggest to that, or what have you learned since, perhaps with your other friends and contactees and experiencers, about how we're also now, as a human race, not just extricating ourselves from the mass media control here on the planet, but are also now going to face maybe a higher level of control or sophistication of control of our creative abilities by other entities here that are currently non-local, and for the most part obscured from our own common shared reality. We don't know about them, or it's ridiculed if we do know about them. How do we deal with that part, Penny?
Well, okay, so let me back up a step. The reason for my volunteering to come here and for the teams, the 4 teams to come here, was because they're in this sector of the solar system, there is a force that was slowly trying to take over various planets, and this was the next one. And the way that life is seeded on planets, it's a long process. It's usually seeded by some very wise and incredibly powerful beings who time it just right, to time everything perfectly. And the goal is, once you seed that life, for it to evolve to become this extraordinary group of humanoids that join what might be called the positive side of things, people that are aligned with life and love, and will fill or populate the universe with that. So the takeover effort, this is like I'm going to say the 3rd or 4th takeover effort that a group of people were engaged in. They had taken up some residence here, and they have people from that are still off planet as well, coming and going. And we were to wake people up because the group that was here to take over knew exactly when to intervene with all the propaganda and all the stories and the movies and the music and everything, because the population here on the planet was still young and still naive. And the goal was to begin, for us, those of us who were coming to prevent that takeover, was to wake them up to their own consciousness, their own power. And yes, they would leave behind that naivete and that simplicity of childhood. But if it was either that or the planet would be lost and we would be subsumed into a group of 22 other planets that had already been taken over. And so that was really the reason for my coming here and saying, okay, and and I have my own reasons for doing that. And that was because I want an invitation eventually to work with those groups that seed life and then nurture it. And it's kind of like almost planting a garden. It's so amazing. It's a long process. So there are other beings here. I've been aware of that from the get-go. And who I was from the minute Kundalini happened. It's like, oh, wow. I was very young and naive until Kundalini. And then all of a sudden, that was the end of that childhood. And there are, I'm going to say, 3 or 4 groups, main groups here. I think there's many more than that, but most of them are transient. But there's maybe a half dozen groups here, but there's 3 or 4 main groups that are really trying to help, and then maybe 1 or 2 that are they're not trustworthy. And so that's there is that to contend with. And when you don't see it and you don't communicate with it, it's just not real. And so you can't really talk about that. You have to say, look, let's start with finding a parking spot and develop your power from there. Power to heal, power to know, power to see the future, power to know when to, back off, the boldness to say, to make a declaration, I guess is probably be the best way to say it, to communicate to the universe, this is what I need right now, and get that. And yes, I have called for rain and gotten rain, shocked the daylights out of some people. But you can do that. And it's exactly like your friend said. You just feel the rain. You're in the rain and it comes. Or you stop it if it's a bad moment or. So there's lots and lots of, I think, exciting times ahead for us. Right now, I think a lot of people are tired of the old narratives and the whole story that everybody's been dealing with for the last 5 or 6 years, but we're not quite into the excitement of where we're going.
That's what I'm trying to do with this episode, basically, or not. And this line of questioning here in the last 2-3 weeks on the show, to bring us again, not necessarily away from decoding what's happening right now. There's a lot of values and understanding why the powers that be are doing the things that they are doing, and what you can do to get out of harm's way, for example, or to live within the cracks of those systems, or to maybe even find a better footing as we transform this world. It's happening in front of your very eyes. It's no longer when the system will change. We are in that birthing process now. And if I doubt people in this audience don't see that, but their friends and families might not see that, but it's because they're not attuned right now to what's really happening. They're still very much focused, and they're very,
it's a gradual change. It can't be too sudden or you reject.
Exactly.
And I'm perfectly proof of that.
Right. And the excitement part is where I want to get to. So I like I said at the beginning of the show, I'm being compelled, forced, initiated, pushed somehow. I don't know how to describe it. But there's something behind this conversation that is bigger than myself. I think that's where I'm getting at. and I'm trying to find a footing there and trying to understand what
Yeah.
perhaps my role is, what your role is, what the Beyond Mystic community watching the show's role is in that understanding, and then in the use of that technology. And so, as you're describing here how to use this technology, as Cliff was describing it here with some of the rules of assumption, one thing that occurred to me in this video, and Terence McKenna has have had a lot of talks about what he calls the self-transforming machine elves that inhabit this reality past this psychedelic barrier, or what he calls a hyperspace. And the way it's been described, and I've been watching other thinkers and researchers on this, um, is basically there's a couple of rules of thought here, that perhaps schools of thought that perhaps these are disembodied thoughts that are taking form in that reality while you're under this psilocybin, or perhaps they are in fact existing outside of your own thoughts and that you can communicate with them. And a lot of researchers and psychonauts have described that very same process, to where many people having journeys would have the same encounters with the same beings, seamlessly with the same message, unbeknownst to the characters going into these particular psychonautic trips. So I thought that was fascinating. And I'm wondering, through your, again, through the training, to the men in the brown robes, perhaps through your Kundalini experience, some of that could be akin to a psychedelic trip in some cases. Have you encountered these machine elves, and what do you think their roles are in that particular reality when you enter it? What is their role, and what is their agenda towards humanity? And I have a few examples to give of what people think they are, but I'm curious where you put them in this process, and are they specifically, now going back to the beginning of the show, part of why in that 100,000 years of this skull capacity not having any change and suddenly having a change, did they have a role in that communication here through the psilocybin and in the mushrooms to early man, to the evolutionary mind process that we find ourselves in today? Penny.
Well, first of all, there are an uncountable number of forms of intelligence of various densities. And you can talk about elves, you can talk about divas, which are extraordinary beings. You can talk about machine elves. But when you talk about machine elves, you're getting into the geometric region of reality. When you have witnessed somebody as a set of geometric forms moving sort of like a U.S. Army tank moves with treads, kind of thing. And you recognize you recognize as a human, but they are a bunch of geometric shapes and colors. You have accessed a level of reality that is just not common. Okay, yeah, there's some right there.
Yeah.
Intelligence tries to form bodies of all sorts. Okay, so keep that in mind. First thing, let's see, what would I say next? We're moving. Okay, so over the last, I'm going to say 20 years, and especially over the last 5 or 6 years, thanks to Beyond Mystic and some other channels and my work and a whole bunch of others, people have been introduced to intuition, and it has moved out of the realm of that's the devil's work, hopefully, into, what's that about? That's about consciousness. What do we need to know about consciousness? And so intuition is knowing from within. And when you let go of your rigid, life has to be this way kind of thinking, intuition begins to flower. And things that you need to know just come to you all the time, constantly. And we ignore 99% of that, but it keeps coming. The next level, next stage of development of us as humans is the understanding that we are multidimensional beings and that every thought creates some kind of form that is you doing something that is not present where you're at. So let me give you an example. When I used to teach here at the farm, and there, be a whole circle of people here, I would notice that somebody would get really thoughtful and kind of freeze for a moment, and then I would see them leave the body, and I would think, oh, they went somewhere. Either I'm boring, or I said something that triggered a whole explosion of thoughts and ideas, or they remembered something or whatever. And I just noted it. I didn't do anything with it. But eventually, what I came to realize was that through a number of my own experiences, which I think I wrote about in Consciousness and Energy, Volume 1, maybe, about realizing how multidimensional we were. And little things. Somebody just wrote to me and said, I have this very clear memory of doing something that I know I did not do today. What is that? That's the multidimensional self that is operational at all times. Every thought you have creates. And if you're busy doing something boring and wishing you were over here doing this thing over here, you will split yourself and your energy, and part of you will begin to function over in that thing you are wishing you were doing. And that will continue to develop, maybe not. Sometimes it just continues in sort of a wispy form and continues to operate until you go back and integrate that into your system, or you decide, I'm going to go do that. And you actually pick up that energy again. But people are busy. There's an old, I'm not sure if it's Indian or Chinese saying that says, you have to stop creating the 10,000 selves. And that's what that's referring to. That it's recognizing how powerful we are and how every thought about ourselves and doing something creates that another version of the self doing that. And so that multidimensional aspect, I think, is the next piece that we have to get under our collective belt. And then we can begin to maybe there's all kinds of stuff you can do with multidimensional existence, but that's really a big step. And there are a few other steps that have to be taken, but we will come to be the masters of reality. And some people may split off and go in a different direction. But those people who are interested in consciousness, in developing themselves in a beautiful world, in a world that works, et cetera, they're now moving. And just in the last month, I was seeing, oh my God, we're tipping in the right direction. We're moving past the tipping point and moving in a direction in which, if we keep working, coming together, even though we're kind of sloppy and uncertain and 5 million questions, and I want it now, and it's not going to happen now. It takes time. In the physical 3D, you have to create it. It's work. And so we're moving in that direction. And I think a lot of people are at the point now where they're just beginning to realize that, okay, I think I'm done with that. I think I'm done with all that propaganda. I think I'm done with all that noise, etc. Let's go create this over here. And when I talk about this over here, the things that need to be redesigned, re-engineered, and recreated, it's a list that's as long as my arm, because almost all of the things that we have chosen to use as energy, forms of energy, are pretty destructive to the human body. And so we need to redesign, and we need to acknowledge those new forms of energy that are out there and learn about those to see what is their impact on cellular development, on consciousness, on the function of the microbiome, or what is the impact of that form of energy, and only engineer according to those things that nurture. And that's what I was talking about when I gave the keynote. It's like we have to engineer things that nurture us, the clothing, the walls, everything among the highly advanced people. Everything nurtures the full development and perfect health and expansive consciousness of the people in that world. And we can copy. We should do the same thing. So
That's very fascinating, and I think I took a few notes there as you were talking, and you're making me think about a different aspect of this. That we're already an hour 20 into the show, and I still have 2 segments I want to go into, but I'm going to come back to you on that, and perhaps we'll do a part 2 to this show, you and I, on that very subject. But now I want to come back to pre-show. You and I were discussing how I had told you maybe 4 years ago or 5 years ago in an interview that sometimes when I'm engaged in these live videos as an experiment with the audience, we create this field of information, right? And that I often have what I call downloads, or sometimes hard voices or imagery pop into my mind. And I remember you asking me, well, what does that look like? And I said, well, it's geometry. And in my mind now, when I'm in these live shows, I have to first absorb the geometry that is coming in. And then somehow there's a mechanism in which I translate that in French, being my native language, to understand the geometry. And then my processor goes to translate that in English to be able then to share that with you guys live in a show, while also reading the content, the comments, and sharing in a conversation with my guests. And I had just recently my very first psychedelic experience. And one of those first things I experienced after kind of dissolving or coming unglued, I guess, in that process, was encountering that geometry. And as soon as I did, I'm like, whoa, I know this stuff. I see it all the time, but I never understood where it was coming from, what it meant. And this, so I'm going to just show you a graphic here. I was looking at this video the other day. I said, oh, I'm going to share this with the audience members. The 4 levels of psychedelic geometry. They interview a bunch of psychonauts, and they kind of break this down to kind of explain to you what they see, how they feel, how all of this comes to life in some of these strips, depending on the doses and depending on the material that is ingested. Now, for me, this geometry, I felt at the very beginning of that trip like a fish in water. Like for the first time, I was in my element. And I thought, wow, this is great. And I just like took off in that. And
good for you.
Yes. And now, many months later, I'm still processing all of that data, which, like I say, when I do a live stream, I'll have an image of maybe that page I just showed you, and that will translate into a thought or a theme or a question for my guest or whatever. But in that particular trip that lasted 8 hours or so, I was fed that constantly, almost seemingly at the speed of light. It was so intense that I'm still now, and I will probably forever decode what it is that hell was communicated to me at the time. And so when you mentioned geometry earlier, I said, oh, I want to bring that thought back to the audience member, because it's very possible that people are encountering geometry now as maybe the veil of this reality is thinning, maybe the fact that we've passed this M9 point, soon to pass M10, where the whole solar system is going to be above this galactic plane now, receiving more energy, it does more information. We are probably going to start feeling this maybe outside of the psilocybin trip as well, as is the case for me when I do these live shows from time to time. And this is not something I control, by the way. I'm just telling you, it does come to me in this matter. So I'm going to be having a very in-depth conversation with Jay Weidner on that very topic next week. I'm going to be sharing with you some of that experience, where that went, where I think it's going, and how I think humanity as a whole, as Terence McKenna was suggesting, had a huge leap in consciousness by this, not just geometry, perhaps the machine elves in there as well, and the understanding through that process that we are, in fact, much more than the individual selves that we think we are, and how
Oh
that
my,
basically evolves our understanding of consciousness to the nth degree. And I think we're in that process now, and it seems to be leaking out at the edge of at the edge of our reality, even for those who are not on a psilocybin trip right now. So let me ask you about that geometry. When I mentioned that to you at the beginning of the show, or maybe pre-show, you said, "Oh, don't forget to mention that during the show. I have something to say
yeah,
about that." So
right.
what can you share with the audience on how this geometry ties in to this consciousness field of ours?
Oh my gosh. Okay, it's probably too big a subject to just, nutshell it very smoothly, but um, the the layer of reality that is, I'm going to say, frequencies in motion. Those frequencies are all kinds of frequencies are jammed together, and they are solitonic in their nature, which means that they don't get destroyed. They are what we call standing waves, and there's millions and millions of them. And those, but even with all of those frequencies jammed together, there are spaces in between. And depending on the frequency, the space will be a color.
Mm.
And the geometry, sometimes it forms beautiful pictures, but sometimes at the raw stage, it will be polygons and squares and triangles, and it moves just very, very slowly. And when you get into that level of consciousness, you're pretty deep into what I'm going to call the nature of how we are. We are geometric in our basic construction. And then we get all these soft edges and things that, that flesh kind of rounds it out quite a bit, makes it pretty, hopefully. But that geometric level is raw energy, and each individual is a little different geometric pattern, and extraordinary. The colors are living colors. And they are pinks and peaches and purples and violets and this chocolate brown that looks so good you could eat it. And whites, all sorts of whites, and with different color pearly streaks, unbelievable. Yellow, greens, oranges.
Like the
And
colors are so intense that
yeah,
I was crying, not out of
yes,
sorrow, but out of sheer amazement and awe, to a
I
level
know.
like, holy shit. Do you guys see that movie Paul? The alien Paul, he escapes from Area 51, and some people who are going to Comic-Con save him and whatever. Okay. So at that point, there's a one or two occasions in that movie Paul where this alien, he's a little gray alien, they depict him that way,
Okay.
shows humans basically their whole history by just kind of touching their pineal gland. And
Oh,
in the show, they kind of give you that kaleidoscope of like, wow, like
yep.
terabytes of information, and
Yeah,
people just fall back and like, wow.
right.
Anyways, it feels exactly like that. Anyways,
Yeah,
in my experience, that's what it was. And I had these two
yeah,
overwhelming feelings. It was bliss
yep,
and love
yeah.
for me. Like that was like, it was so
Right.
intense. And again,
It
the
is.
tears of joy and laughter and amazement and awe of the sheer amount of colors, vibrations, sounds,
I know.
multi-dimensional things coming at me,
Yeah.
to the point where the music that was playing in the background was
Oh,
being embodied in the geometry, then
right.
creating characters that came to life in front of me in this kaleidoscope. It's
That's
just,
right. Oh, that's exactly the term I used. It's like a kaleidoscope. It moves just a little at a time and
yeah,
keeps reshaping, and
yeah,
forms appear and disappear. It's amazing.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
I
I'm curious what you think about at this point psychedelics, because it is a touchy subject matter, although it's getting
Mm,
traction in the last maybe 2 or 3 years, because even before that, very few academics would willingly talk about that on YouTube videos like they're doing
I
today.
know,
A fear of losing their tenure positions in all of these
right?
universities, and now Stanford is doing research on this. So now it's becoming uh, more of a open topic, I guess, for discussion, and we're seeing more and more of this being studied as a use to deal with traumatized individuals or
Yeah,
depressed individuals or PTSD, clearing PTSD. So there's a lot of benefits on that side, which I think is fascinating, but that's not where I'm intrigued
no.
about this. I'm more intrigued about the nature of our reality and what psychedelics bring to that understanding. And again, I'm very new to this, and I'm just beginning to unpack everything that was shared to me in that trip. And I just feel that if we can have this uh, I want to say explosion, but base understanding of humanity. Again, I don't know what that catalyst is. Is it more of that? Is it a morphogenic field that where there's enough psychonauts out there that we have this hundredth monkey effect that suddenly all humanity gets it? Was it why I was seeing already geometry before I went into that psychedelic event now for the last number of years? Again, where are we on that evolutionary mind track based on perhaps what the robes have told you or some of the pre-training you had on the for this mission? Where does that tie in the psychedelics for you, really?
That is such an important piece. The robes, I did not put this in the book, but they did say, we have given you every kind of plant to open your spiritual eyes and ears. And what have you done? You have legislated them into oblivion. And they felt that that was tragic. The reason for those plants and mushrooms and whatever else people have discovered causes you to expand your consciousness dramatically is because when you have one experience, you only need one to open the door to going, holy cow, reality is not what I thought it was. And that one experience, people often end up trying to get another experience the next day and another one the day after that. And that's not what it's about.
Mm-mm.
You're to take that experience, that opening, and work with that until you've absolutely gotten every single thing out of it
Unpack
you
it.
can get.
Yeah.
We have like a 50, 60, 75-year trajectory that we are on before everybody's on board. And actually, I wanted to hang on. When Ashala and I were talking the other day, you guys should go and listen to, what's that, Friday, Intuition Friday.
Yeah.
She had,
The 2 days ago, let me just show the poster
yeah,
sharing. You going? Yeah, this one here.
she had this download that came out. She was doing, yeah, that's the one. She was doing this reading for somebody, and she said 2032 or 2034, 2056, 2078, 2121, 21, I think. 21, yeah, 2121 or 2122. Those were the critical moments. And we work as a population, like you, me, everybody, until 2051. And suddenly in 2051, whether we're here or not, there's, she said, an exponential acceleration, and avatars begin to arise. And then in 2084, we have reached a critical mass of full ascension. And that just made my hair stand on end, because those were the two dates that the robes had taken me to, saying,
wow.
these are critical moments. And when she said those dates, I was like, oh my God.
Huh.
So we are moving slowly but surely, and there's no need to hurry, because you can't, if you hurry too much, you're going to end up doubting somewhere down the line. The pendulum swings the other way a couple times, oh my God, look what's possible. Oh, it's over here. I don't believe any of that crap. I just made it
There's
up.
an
I met
Epstein list. There's no Epstein list. There's an Epstein
yeah,
list. There's no Epstein list. Go away.
right.
These are not the droids you're looking for. Yeah.
I know. And so we can, because consciousness is so rich as a field and
Mm,
so much to learn and so many wonders to experience, we need to go at that in such a way that we go slow and steady and just keep on going.
right.
And we'll get past the crap that we're experiencing now. I think we have made enough of a shift that it'll be a little bit easier than I thought it was gonna be. I kept saying, oh no. And the last 2 months it was like, I think we're doing it. So it's like, okay. Yeah, fingers crossed. We may have some real setbacks, but
Hmm. Hmm.
the development that is unfolding now is almost magical. It's so wonderful. It's so deep. And those, the people that are here that are watching, they're the first, I don't know, I don't want to use war language. I was going to say the first line of warriors. They're the first explorers that are saying, hey, there's more to this than we thought. And I
I
am
think
more
that's
than I
what
thought I was.
I think that's what my biggest outcome or eureka moment was. The first one, because there's been many
Yeah,
since, and as I continue unpacking it, there's many more. But it was
yeah,
that feeling of, oh my God, I now know, like deeply know, truly know
yes.
by experience that I'm more than this flesh suit I'm
That's
walking
right.
into, right? And
That's right.
as a human, as a human who's
Oh,
been
oh,
challenged by esoteric content and hidden content and reincarnations and things like that,
yeah.
it always felt right to me to know that we were eternal souls, or in some nomenclature, a spirit living in a body, and all these things. But that first trip,
Oh,
cemented that reality into me for the first time, where I actually felt it and lived it, like departing this and then eventually coming back 8 hours later.
yeah.
I truly felt it for the first time. And that's what I meant at the beginning about not neglecting that personal experience,
No.
um, uh, and then accepting what the programmers are telling you reality is, right? So there's a
Oh,
big difference there, and this is where I think some of those traps are right now. Now, listen, Nathalie Lavoie says, I'm too pussy for psychedelics. Okay. I'm not suggesting by any means that any of you try psychedelics. No, don't try this at home. I'll say that. I need to be
no.
responsible. Um, but I will say that for me, it was a very transformative experience. Again,
Yeah.
I'll get into details with it with Jay Widener at next week. But that
Mm,
first realization of the eternal nature of who I am, void of this body, was immense. Two, there was this overwhelming feeling of serenity and calmness for the
yeah.
first time in my life. That I want to say it this way, but I might be translating wrong. What will be, in a sense that
That's
you know what I
right.
mean? Like, don't sweat the chicken stuff, or whatever the expression is, right? And I sweat that a lot doing these shows and doing the news shows
Oh,
and trying to understand this and unpacking all of this stuff. I find
oh,
myself often in that role because I'm responding to the audience members who keep pinging us. What does that mean? What did Trump mean by this and all that? And sometimes I feel that that's churning a lot of stress and a lot of undue stress on
it
humanity.
does.
And then
Yeah.
when I saw that, not just geometry, but what followed that geometry for hours, and the communication that came at one level of that through one barrier, I realized that all of that is just so
Noise.
not important. All right. And it gave me that sense of calm that
Yeah.
I had never felt in my life. And
Yep.
that's forever transformed me now moving forward.
Right.
Now, it's not to say that I won't sweat the stuff here in 3D, because I still have to pay a mortgage. I still have to feed my
That's
kids.
right.
I still have to bring them to school. Like, there's stuff I still have to
Yep.
deal, basically. But I'm
Right.
just like, in the sense of who I am, my essence, and the
Right.
eternal reality of it. Suddenly, I'm not as stressed with stuff that maybe would have stressed me before that trip, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It does. It does. Lots of people have said to me, "Why didn't that upset you?" And I'm like, "What for? Why should I get upset?
Mhm.
I'm watching what's unfolding. That was just a tiny piece of it. To react prematurely is, that's not where you end up going once you wake up. And in the end, you don't react at all. Instead, what you do is end up inputting or creating or ignoring or modifying. That whole reaction thing is just gone.
Right.
Yeah.
What's that famous saying? Theirs is not the reason why, theirs is but to do and
What you
die.
doing that? Yeah.
Right? So don't sweat it
Right.
too much. Just do. Like you're the doer in this
Okay.
body. And I thought that was kind of fabulous.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh well.
Last segment I wanted to ping you on was this three-eye atlas thing. You and I talked about it the last time you were on the show.
Yeah.
The fact that NASA purportedly, with one of their quantum computers, analyzed the message. A big kerfuffle came out of that, and there's a lot of question
I
now
know.
as to what that was. Sorry, not Three Eye Atlas, but that was the message from Voyager. And now we're looking at Three Eye Atlas, also a third interplanetary object coming into our solar system,
Yeah.
seemingly displaying a non-human intelligence by its trajectory. A lot of people are suggesting that it might have been deliberately trying to obfuscate itself from our view for a period of time, and the places that it's going to be visiting as it's going through our solar system seems to be mapped out in a very intelligent manner. And there's more reasons to
Right.
believe there's
Yeah.
intelligence there. Now, I say that just to set the stage now for this third segment, which was this whisper in the dark ping
Yeah.
that Cliff High was talking about just a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
Now, this presumably is a phenomenon that perhaps has already started to occur on the planet. But what he was suggesting here in this article, you guys can read that on his Substack, that would be most prevalent in the fall and perhaps as late as this winter.
Yeah.
And where there's a phenomena where people start hearing whispers literally in the dark of these disembodied voices here, and that this is going to freak out the people receiving these messages to the point where they will be forever changed, seeking to perhaps hear it again, seeking to understand whether they actually heard it or whether they're going crazy. So it's going to cause a level of consternation at that level, but it's also going to cause a level of consternation at the level of officialdom. Who the fuck is whispering in the dark to humanity? Is it this Three Eye Atlas thing? Is this some other player in town? Is this again the fact that we're going above, and again, this fall, perhaps the timeline for M10 crossing all of the planets over this galactic plane to where we're receiving more information? What do you make of this phenomena? Did the Rose ever talk about this? Is this a heightened awareness? Is this another player coming into town again in these levels of this game or construct that we're in now to offer perhaps assistance in this birthing canal? What do you make of this whisper in the dark thing, Penny?
Well, first of all, when somebody like Cliffy puts something like that out, that's a hypnotic suggestion. Okay. So people who are susceptible to that suggestion because of the nature of consciousness are going to either hear something or they're going to think they heard something. And people hear stuff all the time and they don't pay attention. So when I read that, I thought, oh, maybe a few more people will wake up to their clairaudience. People are, there have been times when I've heard this very stark and sharp Penny, like somebody's calling me and there's nobody there. And it's like, okay, what was that? And that's a signal to me to sit down and say, okay, I heard, I know you're here. What is it you want? Sometimes there's a message I can pick up, sometimes not. So we'll see what happens. The whisper in the dark, if you're very sensitive, there are people putting messages out electronically. You are going to pick some of that up. And so it's really, 6 of one, half
Well, that
dozen
begs
of
the question. If that is okay, it begs the question. So clearly,
okay.
every human has the propensity for clairaudience, clair-knowing,
Right.
clairsentience, all those
Yep.
clairs, right? It's just a question to what degree and how they've practiced those muscles. So that being
Yeah.
said, here what
Right.
he was saying here too is that there would be no discrimination in so far as the people receiving these messages. It wouldn't be race, it wouldn't be creed, it wouldn't be politics
Nope.
or ideology. It would be ubiquitous across the board. There would be no sense of it.
Right.
And he was saying also that what you just said, that because some people are fearing it, somebody would imagine and maybe start suggesting that they're hearing voices also just by
Yeah.
this hypnotic suggestion, as you called it, or similar
Yeah.
effects to that. So I thought that was interesting. But here you're bringing the concept of maybe the voice to skull technology to where somebody is putting out an electronic message for us to receive it. We,
Right.
to some extent, we've been dealing with that for maybe a few decades here on the planet, honestly,
Right.
if we're honest about the technology being used against us. uh, Now, presumably, and what he was asking in this and in subsequent texts, where he and I were having a conversation about this, um, he was wondering if a third player that is non-local could be attempting this communication somehow, whether that was 3i Atlas or something else coming from Galactic Center, now that we're above the galactic plane. And this is now not necessarily just opening up the fact that some people are clairaudience, but there's something bigger being played out
Right.
here somehow. This is what I'm trying to tackle. What does this all mean? Where does this all go? Is there any indication that we are in fact going to be having out of body communication with other entities that are non-local, and this could be our entry in that space, and that's coming up just here in the fall? Do you see that coming, Penny?
Well, let me say that when I first saw, I didn't read anything about it. I just saw, um, what is it? 3i Atlas is the name of it. My
Mm-hmm.
first gut
Yeah.
level knowing was that's one of them. And so I'll say that there are certain groups of ETs who fashion their craft to look like a rock moving through space. It's totally looks
Mhm.
organic. You would never know that that was a craft. And they're, and that's just the way they think is the best way to stay below the radar for, because there's lots of people that are moving around out there in space. So that was my first gut level reaction. And then I started hearing all this hype about it, and I thought, well, maybe we should watch. Maybe we should wait and see. And then I was listening to the guy on Suspicious Observers, or whatever his name is, and he said, there's a lot of talk about 3i Atlas. It looks like a natural phenomenon. It's developing a tail. It's got this. It's got that. It's totally natural. And I thought, okay, so maybe my first gut reaction was wrong. But at this point, I think it's too soon. We're trying to jump to conclusions before we've collected enough evidence, seen enough action from it. There's no need to be afraid, because those people that fashion their craft to be totally organic are they're peace lovers. So there's, whatever the news is saying, oh, we need to be afraid, or are they going to attack? No, they're not. And so there's all kinds of stories that are now passing around, but I think we should just watch and wait and pay attention, not take our attention away from that, because if that's coming into our solar system, if that group of people is coming in, that says something about the action going on here on our planet or in this solar system. So that
Right, we're coming to some type of important nexus.
Yeah,
and
they don't come
so
around
far,
for no reason.
right, and so far as the timing is concerned, what we're understanding is that 3i Atlas could be parking itself behind our moon or the sun here as early
Right.
as November of this year. So that's the
Yeah.
time frame we're looking at. I just thought it was interesting that it was the same time frame that we were picking up these whispers in the dark, and I was curious to see if there was a correlation with that, or if that was some type of maybe another player leveling up the playing field. Or, as you said, it's always been there, but we never picked up on it. And now suddenly something is happening to humanity. Where You
Yes.
talked about the solar sneeze earlier, and many researchers have opined that during this solar sneeze, or perhaps just before it, humanity goes through, and also in these yugas of time, to where we have more
Right.
emanations from galactic center, humans go through this transformation process to where they have heightened senses, heightened
That's
sensibilities, heightened capacities, etc. And that,
right.
for example, people would have the ability to smell 50 miles away, or to see further, or to hear further, and all these things. So that could be also what he's picking up here in these whispers in the dark, the ability of humans suddenly to be able to pick up what was always
Right.
there. The question is, those whispers, what are they saying? What are they communicating? And why are
Yeah.
we, or why is universe now, the ontological model, making it so maybe self-revealing, so that so that
Yeah.
humans can actually understand what the hell is going on here, void of this perhaps system of control? All of these are fascinating questions, again,
I know.
knocking around in this big head of mine as I'm doing these shows and trying
Oh,
to
yeah.
have these conversations about things other than just decoding the news, in an attempt to, I guess, steer the conversation towards, um, I guess, an evolutionary process that is for our highest good. I think that's
Right.
the best way I can put it. Does that make sense? And do you share, or do you understand why perhaps I'm being guided to do so? Or because
Yeah.
I told you forced earlier in the pre-show, I feel like I'm being forced to do so. Nobody's forcing me. Cliff High's not forcing me. I'm listening to a
I
whole
know
bunch
what
of
you mean.
people, but I just have this weird kind of, also maybe a sense of urgency. I have to admit that feeling is there too. That these conversations need to happen sooner rather than later. Why is that in your view, Penny?
Because the drive to evolve, once you start that process, you can't really shut it off, and it gathers steam and pushes you. And if you fight it, you'll get sick typically.
Mhm.
So you don't want to fight it. And and I think that whole whisper in the dark. When I first read that, I thought that's just the next stage in our development of intuition, listening, and whatever you hear, what is the message? If it says go kill your grandmother, don't listen. That's not a good message.
Yeah.
If it says, just your name, then you are to pay attention to what you're doing. If there's an actual message and you don't know what to make of it, you can write it down and contemplate that and learn to extract meaning from something that at first is kind of like a mystery. And that's part of the process of developing a more expansive consciousness in which you can hear messages and know what the heck they're talking about, because sometimes it comes in symbolism.
Right.
So we are that drive. Once you have, imagine it this way: there's this whole set of stairs, and we take a step up on the first step. We know that there's this thing called intuition, but nothing happens. And then all of a sudden, something intuitive, big intuitive message comes, or you have a vision. You're on the second step then, because now you're like, how did that happen? Why did that happen? How did I know that? What does that mean? And we just keep stepping up. And that is the drive to unfold ourselves to very high potentials. Why? Because we're not meant to suffer. And 3D is pretty rough.
Oh yeah. It's the school of hard knocks.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Susan
it
said,
is.
JC, you're feeling compelled and your Mystic Collective is hungry for it. Well, thank you. I appreciate that comment,
Yeah,
because, again, it's somewhat new territory, but it's not. I mean, the whole reason for Beyond Mystic and going through that
yeah,
Tory gate was to go from that mundane information to the sacred, right? Or that non
yeah,
local information. And to some extent,
right.
that's what I've been doing for years. But now that's leading to a different type of conversation in a different place, to where perhaps the first part of my show, I got in trouble with Penny a couple of years ago because we were talking about Kundalini awakening. And I think
Yeah,
we weren't ready for that. And then we got
right.
into news decodes that seemed to be what the community was wishing. And now we're extrapolating from that. Okay, now what? What do we want? And how do we take control of this stuff? Because
Right.
clearly those in control are not, they don't have our highest intention at heart. So I
Yeah.
think we're here now. Somebody says, "Hey, yes, loving the chat tonight. Great conversation for a Sunday night. Love you. Thank you. Love you too." And I want to address this one
Right.
too. Fancy Pants 323. Oh, JC, you're such a blessing. Thank you. I spent the day going down rabbit holes.
Mhm.
Of all the Drek and scene that gets the heavy spending time with you and Penny, of course, is my favorite. Jenny. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate those really nice
Yeah.
comments tonight. Now, I think let's try to wind this down a little bit here tonight. We've explored a lot of things. We've pushed the envelope a little bit in our understanding of consciousness, but not necessarily consciousness itself, but where and how we perceive our own consciousness. And I think that's key here to perhaps getting to a place of mastery to where we understand how that is being suppressed on one hand, how our ability to create is being overlaid. Maybe in our reality, in our karma shared reality, and how perhaps we can not just extricate ourselves from that, but then use that information and that mastery here to bring us to the next level, and then at least be able to see perhaps who all the players are on that field as well. There might be more other players that are coming into field or into our field of view right now that we have to take into account. And I think we've done a good job setting the stage for that conversation tonight. Of course, I'm going to be talking about the psychedelic stuff next week with Jay. But Penny, as you were coming into the show, you and I had shared quite a bit of information, videos, and reference material to try to do this in the best possible way tonight. Am I missing anything? Is there anything else that you think is important also as we're winding down the show here tonight to kind of leave the audience with one, that sense of optimism you just discussed, that we're entering in this new world, we're in this birthing canal, but two, that we are very much that we have agency here, and that we can do a lot more to attain self-mastery than perhaps the level that we could ever fathom, and that's just around the corner as well for many reasons. Can you share that with the audience before we go?
I think two things. One is like have a set of expectations, and I use that word deliberately, about what the future could be. The second thing is an exercise, the actual, like over the next week, as you walk through your day, imagine that you are this being walking around in a ball of energy that's about, we'll just say 8 feet in diameter to start. It's really about 16, but just, move your attention out to like 8 feet and move through your everyday as remind yourself that you are this energy and that you're sliding over and through walls and floors and furniture and cars, etc. as you get in and out. What are you knowing in that? What is some part of you is knowing the surroundings you're in differently than the little consciousness that you use to perceive with on a day-to-day basis. So just practice being that ball of intelligent energy and see if you can expand your consciousness a little bit. And then in terms of looking toward the future, oh my gosh, there's so much good stuff that is coming. All of the things that we have complained about, make a list of all your complaints. Write them down. Have a piece of paper and put a pencil by it. Every time you think of something, run over and write it down on that piece of paper. I really don't like this. I really wish this would change. I really, I really resent blah, blah, blah. And then when you get, 8 or 10 things on your list, go back to the first thing on the list and say, what am I going to do about that? What can we do about that? Or if you don't think you can do anything, what would you love to see happen or take shape in the world? Because we have all new technology, all new houses, housing, clothing, food, governance, technology, art, belief systems, celebration, rituals. Everything new is coming over the next few years. So life is to be enjoyed. And those are the things. You can't enjoy it if you don't know what you want to enjoy.
Very well said. Hey guys, if you're interested in more of this talk, of course, on consciousness, please go to the Beyond Mystic Academy webpage. There you can get the whole conference that was streaming here in Ottawa earlier this spring, including, of course, Penny's keynote on consciousness. You can check that out. There's many hundreds of dollars worth of workshops there in that material, but Penny's stuff is there too. So check that out on the Academy. And while you're there too, I want to, before we go this evening too, I want to talk to you about these amazing soaps. Now, I sent you a batch of these soaps here a couple of weeks ago. Penny, these are from FloralineFarm.ca, all organic, absolutely amazing creations here from Aline. We're going to be giving away one of these little box sets here tonight for the audience members. Again, a big thank you to all of you watching the show and supporting us. And a big thank you to Aline giving away these beautiful prizes to you guys there. If you're interested in this, go check it out there. BM10 is a coupon code to get 10% off there on that website. Tell us about these soaps and your first experience receiving this package in the mail, Penny.
I was like, oh my God, I got a present from JC, and it was this soap. And I actually, I left him right on my kitchen cupboard because I could smell them for probably a week. It's like, oh my gosh, I just want them. I want that smell in my kitchen. And then finally I moved him to one of them to the bathroom and said, okay, let's use it. They are wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And you don't get quite the drying that you get with regular soap.
Absolutely.
So,
They're very smooth and they moisturize your hands. Absolutely. Yeah. We were mentioning at the beginning, we had this list about embodiment, your nervous system, your food, your exercise. We talked about meditation, and then we talked about psychedelics. One thing you can do also in that same train of thought is remove all of these toxins from your life, right? And so whether that's your toothpaste, whether that's your soaps, this was the genesis behind Aline's creation here, was to remove, to the extent that we can, as much of those toxins from our daily use. So guys, if you haven't tried these soaps, check it out, FloralineFarm.ca. Do you have a question in mind to give one of these away to the audience members? Something relatively easy with a one-word answer? Okay, let's do it. Let's give these away.
So what did I call the big ocean that we all live in?
The big ocean that we all live in, guys. While we wait for that to populate here in the live chat, of course, you can find Penny and you can support her here on her Patreon. And what's coming up here also on pennykelly.com in terms of your intuition courses as well. A lot of people interested in that, Penny.
Yeah, the intuition, I'm almost done with this year's intuition, but January we start up again, and next weekend is a master teacher program. It's for teachers who really want to get on board with the new education system that's coming. So I'm a specialist in accelerated teaching and learning and brain compatible teaching and learning, and what those do is develop the whole person. I love the education system we could have would be marvelous. And so I have a class coming up Friday, Saturday, Sunday from 2 to 6 p.m. all 3 days. And it's called the Master Teacher, and it's an eye-opener. It's intense. It is an eye-opener. Awesome. And it also is meant to support people who want to create curriculum, maybe don't want to teach, but have some information they want to pass on to homeschoolers or, to whatever, or somebody who wants to become what we call a freelance teacher, available to teach something that, could be 5th grade science, it could be 10th grade physics, it could be English, it could be another language, in what we call the regular school system for people who want material to teach their children, but they don't want to send their kids to school.
Right. It's a brave new world. We have to create all of these new structures. Guys, check it out. pennykelly.com. All right, let's go to the live chat here. Penny, let me know when to hold it here, and we'll pick a winner here.
Okay.
Just tell me when to stop.
Stop.
Okay. My cursor went on Rosie Thorne. The soup.
Okay. All right. You guys
Congratulations.
are good.
Congratulations,
Everybody got it.
Rosie Thorne. If you go to Beyond Mystic, top of the page,
All right.
just fill out the tech support form here, and I'll send this over to Aline, and she can get your address to send you some of these amazing
Okay.
soaps. And if you want to try them for yourselves, yes, please visit
Ooh.
floralienfarm.ca and use the coupon code there, BM10.
Yep.
Man, Penny, what an amazing conversation tonight. Thank you for helping me navigate all of this, and bringing your wisdom and your expertise on this subject matter. I think we've done a good job tonight. And let us know, guys, in the live chat, like, have we done that good job tonight setting the stage for this conversation? And perhaps let us know if there were things that are still left, perhaps ambiguous to
Yeah.
you, or areas that you
Questions.
think we should focus on for the next show. We are going to do a part two. A lot of people are asking already in the chat for a part two to this one. So let us know in the comments what you feel about the show tonight. And yeah, big thank you for participating. And if you love this content, yeah, please do subscribe and support us in growing these channels, whether it's here on YouTube or on Rumble. And finally, share this with your friends. This is what it's all about. This is why Penny and I are taking more than 2 hours here on our Sunday night to share this information with you tonight. It's the name of the game at this point, and I think
Right.
we're all the better for it, for sharing that information.
Yeah.
So big thank you for being part of this community, guys. Big thank you, Penny, for the 2 hours plus here sharing your expertise with the audience members tonight. I absolutely love you guys. If you want more of these shows, go to beyondmystic.net. Look at the schedule for the week. A lot of big shows, 20 or 24 shows coming up again this week here on the channel. It's a big week. So I love you guys. Have a great evening, and we'll see you soon. Au revoir.
Yeah. Hasta pronto. Love you. Take care.